Where are you from originally?
Originally from Philadelphia, and then moved down here about 14 years ago.
Okay. And did you grow up with siblings? What was early childhood like?
So I have an older brother. My parents married, still together. My father was a police officer in Philadelphia. He's retired now, but he finished off as a lieutenant. My mom was a nurse at a hospital up in Philadelphia. An older brother who just about 3 years older than me. Good relationship. Very good family, very good upbringing. Normal, Philadelphia childhood, Catholic school, very close-knit neighborhood. Like everyone we went to school with lived in the neighborhood, lived on the street. It was back in the days where we're outside all day, weren't on phones, and the good old days.
Yeah, come home when the lights turn off.
Yes.
Yeah.
Spending days down in the woods, like just building forts and building jumps for our bikes. Like those were kids' days. They don't know. Well, most kids don't know that now.
Yeah. How was it with your father being in law enforcement? Did he come home and share some of the stories and what was going on? Was he around?
My dad was around, but he did shift work. So there would be, 2 weeks where I wouldn't really see him. Especially if he was on the 4 to 12 shift. He was leaving before I got home from school and getting home when I was asleep. So there would be some time, like a week or two, where I wouldn't see him much, which, I understood, but it wasn't, I wouldn't say like it was hurtful, but it did kind of suck a little bit because I always, looked up to my dad. My dad was like my superhero. My mom was always around.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up, my mom was always home. She was a nurse, but I never seen her work until like I got older. Because when I went to school, she would do home health care. She would work little bits where we would never really notice.
Yeah.
So my mom was always there. She was very involved. Like she was like that super mom.
Yeah.
That was the mom who would take you everywhere, take your friends places, always have the plan together. My mom was that mom.
Yeah.
And she was awesome. Like even to this day, she is there. I can call her middle of the night. Doesn't matter. She's here. She's there.
Yeah.
And my dad being in law enforcement, like growing up, I thought it was cool, but you know how it is. The cops' kids are always kind of the worst. Once you hit a certain age, you start rebelling.
Mm-hmm.
My brother, the older siblings seem like they always get away with a lot more. And the baby of the family has the microscope always. But, growing up with that dad in law enforcement and seeing other kids and how their parents were, like, I always wondered, like, oh, well, if my dad wasn't a cop, I wonder if I could do this, or why can't I be this way? And so I always had that inkling in my, like, what was that grass like on the other side of not being a law enforcement family and having that worry, because that worry was there. I had a girl that I went to grade school with whose dad was a cop, and, he was killed. And while we were in grade school, and, it was devastating. And like, I couldn't imagine what she felt like. But after that, like, I was scared to death for my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't even like her dad like was on some crazy call. He just walked into a Dunkin' Donuts, like went in to go get donuts and didn't even see it coming. Like, so that fear was always there. And especially after her dad was killed, it made it even a lot worse. But you never want to show it.
Yeah.
I didn't want to let my dad know that I was worried about him,
Yeah. So were you like hiding to your emotions as well as a young kid?
Oh,
Not only
absolutely.
full of fear, but kind of keeping those emotions bottled up at a young age is not healthy.
No. And, once I hit a certain age, I really had to bottle stuff up. I experienced a major childhood trauma, and my parents never knew. And to this day, that haunts me because I know it haunts my father. It hurts him so bad because as law enforcement, he couldn't protect his own family, and only if I guess he's seen it, or if I said something might have been different. But years and years later, when they eventually found out, I mean, it crushed them. Like I could see, even this day, if I could still see it, how much it hurts. So, being 10, 11 and dealing with that trauma and not telling anyone and dealing and have to hold it in, deal with it all yourself. And in that constant debate of, do I tell them my dad's a cop? He could arrest them. But just being so afraid and scared and ashamed, you just keep it in. And then that's where everything starts to spiral.
Yeah.
That's what I started smoking weed when I was 11, just to learn how to cope and go numb and escape it all. And that's where the life of hell began.
With the childhood trauma, was it you didn't say anything because you were scared someone wouldn't believe you? Someone would,
All of it.
repercussions towards you?
Everything.
Yeah.
I mean, one, no one would believe me. Repercussions that people might think I was gay or homosexual or, and I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, I was scared, and I was afraid of what would come after as well. And those fears were valid.
Yeah.
It wasn't, that I was afraid that like something would happen to my family per se, like harm wise. I was afraid of people knowing what happened, which was my biggest fear of most of my life.
Yeah.
And I just try to suppress it, and it nearly killed me.
So you're 11 years old, you're smoking weed.
Yep.
What does the progression look like? And then what kind of drugs did you start doing in high school?
Okay. So started out smoking weed, and I was still in grade school, and no one else in my grade school was like, in my grade was really smoking weed, like 11-year-old kid, like, what are you doing?
That's young.
It's young. So now I had an older brother. Now granted, he really didn't want me hanging out with him. Like he's not the one like, oh, here, let's smoke. However, I hung out with his friends. So he had a friend that lived around the corner who was in a very bad situation. Growing up, we knew it was a bad situation, but realistically, like we always thought it was a kid's dream. This kid had no parents. His mom died. His dad was out drinking. He was a really bad drunk. He had an older sister who like kind of was out doing her own things, but you had this probably 16, 17-year-old kid at that time with a house all to himself, no parents, no supervision, but nothing. So we would have this like a party house. We would trash it. There would be like garbage feces. I mean, it was a crap hole like this, and everyone hung out there. All the parents, like my mom would try to step in and help, like try to help the kid out. Like he would get in trouble at school and they would try to find his dad and they couldn't find him. So they would call the other kid's parents to see, hey, can you help? So I would go there and we would smoke and drink. Now, for me, drinking was never my thing. Even like as I got older, I'm a very picky eater. Like I eat like a child and I probably have some sort of eating disorder, not like oh, I gotta stay skinny, but like certain foods like just give me the ick and like maybe nauseous. And I'm sure I have some type of issues with that. But drinking with my whole like eating disorder kind of thing, it never appealed to me. Like I didn't never even like the taste of it. Like I never really liked liquor. It would make me gag, want to throw up. Like, so drinking was never my thing. But I loved smoking. So once I really started getting in to start smoking and I started going over to this kid's house where it was just like all the degenerates and like potheads would go. And it was just like, that was the Northeast Philly drug den basically. And now there wouldn't be any like hard drugs. Like you had mushrooms, you had like back in the day, like the fun 90s, early 90s, early 2000s stuff. But I mainly stuck with weed for years. Every now and then I would mess with like mushrooms or something like that. For years, it was strictly weed. And like I was content with it, completely happy. You know, I really enjoyed going searching for the different types and different, you know, like I really kind of enjoyed that whole thing of it. Well, as I got older, I was probably about 15, 16, still smoking weed. And I always gravitated to more older people, especially when I was doing drugs. A lot of the younger people my age weren't really into drugs. And that's no fault of their own. I mean, I was just a little messed up and needed the drugs. So when I got into high school, that's when it really started getting a lot worse. So I started out going to a Christian high school, Catholic high school, and Catholic high school in Philadelphia. And when I was in grade school, I was bullied, you know, and had a little bit rough time. And then after, as I got a little bit older in grade school, it got a little bit worse. Well, then when I went to high school, it completely flipped. I got pretty popular and I enjoyed it. I wanted to be that kind of cool kid. Mm-hmm. Well, I was smoking and I was like, got that reputation of that cool pothead kid. I was like goth kind of, but I hung out with like I hung out with everyone, you know, so I got along with all the different groups I would supply, you know, I would help people out, help them get stuff. Well, I started dating this girl who we're still friends with to this day. She was actually at my wedding. Started dating this girl who was like in a completely different world than I was in. I mean, we were still like, she smoked and all that, but she lived in like Mayfair, and her group of friends were like those thuggish group of friends, you know, and the friends I had like weren't that type of friends. Mm-hmm. So one day at school, you know, we were having problems with this other high school that was up the road that was for like bad kids. Like you got kicked out of school, if you were in juvie and you got out, you went to this one school. Well, they would always come down to our bus stop and like smoke and mess with the kids from the Catholic school. Well, they didn't like me very much. One, because of the girl I was dating. And two, I was this little white dude that had some good weed and like, you know, was flexing and, you know, shitting on them. They didn't like it very much. So my girlfriend at the time was friends with a couple of them. And she told me like, hey, I wouldn't like go to the bus stop today. Like they're coming down to fuck you up. And I was like, all right. So she told me like early that morning. So I was like, well, screw this. If they're coming to get me, I'm going to take a couple down with me. Like, did not care whatsoever. Now, we've had issues with these kids in the past. Like, the school was aware because there was almost fights out there. So there was like documentation. Hey, there is issues with these people. So they didn't do it. Nothing they did. There's nothing they could do about it or did about it. So I went and was like, all right, I'll take it upon myself and I'll take a couple out. I don't care. So
By yourself?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I was nutty. So I went to school with 2 sets of brass knuckles, a butterfly knife, and mace. And figured, I'll put the brass knuckles on each hand, got a knife in one hand, and we'll go at it. And someone ratted me out. And it was actually one of my friends that was like in my like little clique of friends. They ratted me out. And I remember sitting in class and I think there was the principal who came, and I seen him like coming in the classroom looking around, and like my stomach just dropped. And I just knew. And I'm like, that's for me. And like I'm sitting there, I'm like, should I run? Like all these things are going through my mind. Do I run? Do I just sit? Do I try to ditch this stuff? And then sure as enough, here he comes, pulls me out of class. And we're walking, and he's like making small talk with me, and my heart's and I start like I am like nauseous because I'm like so panicked and anxious. So we're walking down this hallway, and he like stops to talk to someone, and I hear the guy, a teacher or someone goes, "Oh, is that him?" And he's like, "Yeah." And then they stop, and he tells me to keep on walking. He's like, "Oh, keep on walking down to the office." And in my mind, I'm like, should I just take this out and throw it in the trash can? Like, try to think of how I can ditch all my stuff. And I didn't even attempt it. By the time, like, it was happening so fast. So we go into the office, and they take me in, and here comes a cop.
Mm.
And he's like, you got anything in your bag? And I'm like, maybe. So they grab my bag and open it up, and they pull out brass knuckles, knife, the mace, and then a little bit of weed. And they just look at me, and I'm like, what do you want me to say? So I ended up getting arrested. And I remember this drive, sitting in the back of the cop car, driving down Route 1 up in Philly, going to like the precinct. And I looked out the window, and I see my parents driving. Because they heard the school called them that I was arrested. And they happened to be driving past the cop car. And I looked over, and I seen them. And they like, I could see my mom just crying her eyes out, and I'm just like, I lost it. And we get down there, and I'm sitting in the holding cell, for hours. And they asked me what was the whole thing, if I was going to had a plan to hurt people in the school and all this stuff. And I basically told them, I said, no, I was supposed to be getting jumped today, and you weren't doing anything about it. So I was protecting myself, So I ended up getting charged, and I got kicked out of school. I was like, it was in January. And so I had to go do a diversion program where I had to go to some after school program, stay out of trouble. And I did all that with flying colors. But I ended up having to go, got kicked out of school. So I went to this no one would take me. Absolutely. No school would even think about taking me, because when I just got arrested in a school. So there was this little Christian high school up in Philadelphia. Now, where I lived was a nice part of Philadelphia. I lived up in Northeast Philadelphia. Where this school wasn't in the nice part of Philadelphia. It was like kind of down in the ghetto. So it was about almost a 40-minute drive every morning to get down there. And there was 180 kids in the school, and I was one of 10 white kids. And, they welcomed me with open arms. Like, and coming from like a Catholic school, it was completely different. And like, I never really knew the difference between the two, kind of. Like, I always thought it was kind of the same, which it is, but there's big differences. And, I hated the Catholic Church. I hated this. I hated the whole system of it. So when I went into this Christian school, and they were like, like so nice to me, being so welcoming, like it kind of freaked me out. I'm like, what's their agenda?
What's
like,
the catch?
Yeah, like, why are you being so nice to me? Like, what do you want from me? And it took me a while to kind of get over that. And I like started making my way in that school. And I got very friendly with the principal and a couple of teachers. Well, once I got in there, that's where like my drug use really started like to turn. Because at this point it was still up. I was just doing marijuana, still smoking weed. And once I got into probably my end of freshman year and going into sophomore year of high school, it got bad. So when I would go to the school, I got real friendly with the principal. I got a couple other friends in there, and the principal would give me money every day and go down to the store and get me lunch, and you can go smoke and stuff if you need to. Because he like knew we smoked cigarettes and stuff.
Got it.
So like, but he knew we smoked weed.
Yeah.
So like, but he would let us go out every day at lunch and go smoke a cigarette and go get lunch. Well, so he would give me $10 every day. And at the corner, we had like this little seafood place, a little pizza place. So he would always get the same thing, basically. He would get like some imitation crab meat and like some noodles or something, it would take like 5 minutes or whatever. But I would go down, run and quick get his food, run it back, and be like, I got to go wait for my food at the pizza place. And I would just never go back, and like, it was a daily thing. And like,
just be careful with your arms on, like hitting them on the thing. Okay. Yeah.
So it was like a daily thing. And, I would go out and I would just get baked as hell and zero cares. Like and I would just go off and do my own thing. Well, I had a teacher in there, my Bible teacher, who like really took a liking to me and really like actually cared about me. To this day, we still talk, and he's probably the one person that I really ever felt that truly cared just because he really cared. And he would call my mom almost every day that I would leave and give my mom like panic attacks. Every time the phone rang, she would have a panic attack because it was this teacher calling her like, he left again, or he did this again, and I got really bad in that school, where to the point where at this point I was hanging out with some older friends and we could start moving into Percocets. And we weren't just taking Percocets. We weren't eating them. We were snorting them. So when I was at this school, starting like sophomore year, I would be in the bathroom half the day with a textbook in my lap and just crushing up pills and snorting pills all day. And I was the only kid in that school that was like that bad on drugs. So they all knew like I smoked. I was a little stoner kid, but no one really knew as bad as it was until one day. Sophomore year, there was this Puerto Rican chick who came in, and she had just got a prescription of muscle relaxers. I think they were Somas. And I never I'd taken them before, but it was just like a muscle relaxer. Like, ain't gonna do it for me.
It's not an opiate.
Not an opiate. So this girl, she was like, she goes, do you want these? And I'm like, 3 pills? Sure. So I go and she gives me this whole bottle of them. And I'm like, I don't think these are going to do too much for me. So I take the bottle and dump out like 5 or 6 in my hand. And I like look at her and I smile and I look at my hand and she's like astonished I'm about to take like 5 or 6 of them. And I look at the bottle and there's probably like 10 left or 15 left in there. And I'm like, smile at her. I'm like, nah. And I ate the bottle and then threw the other 5 back in. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be an interesting day. And like, with zero cares. Like I did not care what was about to happen. And so that was in second period study hall that happened. Third period, about 30 minutes later, I walk into the classroom, boom, right down. And like the teacher comes over and I'm like out. And I don't know how I got myself like to come back like coherently to like talk to this guy. I get back up and he's like, are you okay? Okay. Like freaking out. And I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I just got real lightheaded. And I'm like slurring. So I'm like, I just need to go lay down. So I go lay down, like go in the classroom. This teacher is freaking out. Like wants to call an ambulance, wants to call my mom. And I'm like, I'm good. And I'm in my mind, I'm probably talking right. Okay. And I'm probably looking like a sloth or something, like I just would not let him do anything. I just kept on telling him, I'm good. Just let me sleep. So he's like, well, if you don't like seem better within this class, I'm calling an ambulance or calling your mom. And I'm like, okay. So I end up like sleeping the whole rest of the class. And I'm like, I don't remember much of this. I know I slept most of the class. And then after the class, one of my friends came in and grabbed me and literally just pulled me out and took me out to his car and drove me to his house. I woke up a day later. And like, he was like, I just sat here and made sure you weren't going to overdose.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, at that point, when I woke up, I'm like, if it was that bad, maybe you should have called an ambulance or something. But like his mind, he didn't want to get in trouble. He didn't want to get me in trouble.
Mm.
And after that, everyone kind of knew like, oh, he's bad. Like the students, like it became more of an inside joke with them. And at the time, I thought it was like that. I was cool.
Mm.
Looking back now,
that's scary, dude.
It's scary.
You could have died.
Absolutely.
And not calling an ambulance and, trying to wait it out. And, your friend your friend just didn't know better. No. He was just trying to be a good friend. But I get it. You could have easily died right there.
Oh,
and that could have been the end of it.
Absolutely.
Did you move on to stronger opiates?
Oh, yeah.
What did that progression look like? And how did you get there?
So I was hanging out with the same group of friends. They were a little bit older. We all started doing Percocet. There was like a little group of perk heads, basically. Yep. So we all loved doing perks. We would all get high together. We would be together all the time. So one of our friends sold oxys.
What year is this?
Let's see. Probably 2008, 2006, roughly.
So this is when oxys were like going.
Yeah. So I graduated high school in 2006. So I was doing oxys while I was in high school. So 2005, 2006, because then I moved into heroin probably 2007, 2008 when the first fentanyl wave hit Philadelphia and like people were dropping dead.
Mm.
But so when I started, so I had a friend who was selling oxys, and like my whole group, they start transitioning over to oxys. And me, I was stuck still doing perks, and they wouldn't let me do the oxys. And I would ask them, oh, let me get a little bit. And they're like, listen, no, like we're kind of upset. You're doing the perks. We don't want you really ruining your life. You're a lot younger than us. Leave the oxys alone. So I was mad, but I respected it. So I'll say probably for a good 2-3 months, I just still stayed with the perks. And then there's one day we're sitting in our friend's car, the guy who sold them. And I'm sitting in his back seat and I look down and there's a Oxy 80 sitting right there on the floor, like in the track of the seat. And I look down, I'm like, oh, I'm like, that's mine. That is mine. So I reach down, I quick pocket it. And then later on that night, I go home and I'm scared shitless. And I break off a little tiny piece. Tiny piece, crush it up. And I'm like, I'm sitting here looking at it like, that's not going to do anything to me. Like, it was so small amount. I'm like, this ain't going to do jack shit. And I'm sitting here like, maybe I'll just do a little more, But I was like, well, let me try it first. Cause like, I was scared. I ain't gonna front. I was scared.
Of course.
Scared. So I went, snorted it, and it was like, wham. And I was like, okay, no more perks. Like, and that fast, that was it. And then it like, this was when you were lucky if you could get 3 for $100. This is like they were
80s.
The 80s were $40 and $50 a piece.
Yeah.
So I started doing the oxys, and I was hiding it from them for quite a while until one day it was just like, I was so sick and I was like, listen, they were like, I'm like, listen, I've been doing oxys for months now. Just, it is what it is. And once it like fully went on oxys and I had to do 2-3 a day, it was brutal. Getting the money up, getting that money up every day, it was brutal. It was brutal. And the withdrawal from it, oh my God, even worse. That I've been through all types of withdrawal. Oxy's one of the worst. Opiate withdrawal. That's synthetic.
I've been through that.
Oh God, it's horrible.
Many times.
I remember my first time I ever withdrawed. So I was institutionalized a few times, suicide, when I was younger. So my first time was 15, and I was doing Percocets, still doing Percocets, but I just kind of started. I was new. I was only probably doing it for a few months, and I remember going into this hospital and getting so sick, and I had no idea what it was. Like, my back hurt. I couldn't sit still. My legs were so restless at night. I couldn't sleep. I was freaking out.
Flu-like symptoms.
Oh my God. And I didn't know what it was. And I'm in the hospital, on suicide watch in a mental hospital. And I'm like, trying to get them to give me stuff to calm down, but they don't know, I don't think they realize that I'm withdrawing. So it's just a whole shit show. And that the next morning, I call my friend who we were getting high with, and my parents were supposed to be coming up that day for a visit. So I weaseled my way in to get my friend to come with my parents to come see me. So when they come up, I'm talking to my friend, I'm like, dude, something's going on. He's like, dude, you're withdrawing. You're addicted to this shit. You're going through withdrawal. And I'm like, well, do you have anything to help me get out of this withdrawal? And he gives me an oxy right there in the hospital. And that's when I realized, okay, I'm in this now. Yeah. And looking back, I wish I would have kind of took that as, all right, let's cut this right now while it's still fresh.
Mm-hmm.
But it just started a whole long line of hospitalizations.
But you think, I've been at that point before where it was like, I look back now and I'm like, why didn't I just stop at that moment? And I've thought about it. It's because I always thought it would never happen to me, meaning it would never go further than that point.
Yep.
And I'm going to stop eventually. I'm aware of it. I will, when I get the job at a high school or at a college when I'm a year into the job after college, when I get promoted and I'm this or that, or when I get married, I'll stop. Like it just keeps going, and that bottom just keeps getting lower and lower.
Yes.
So you're now addicted to oxys.
Yep.
What does that progression look like? And do you eventually move up to heroin? You said heroin.
Yeah.
So how did you get to heroin?
So,
and how are you coming up with this money all the time? Are you like stealing, or are you?
Oh, stealing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I hate to say it, like it kills me to this day. I stole a lot of stuff from my parents.
Yeah.
Stole a lot of stuff from my brother, and
you're not alone.
I know, but it's still something that kills me to this day. I feel horrible about. It's something I hate to admit that I did, but yeah, I stole tons of stuff from my parents' jewelry. I would go to stores and steal stuff from Home Depot. Little like pharmacies, I would steal stuff. But a lot of times I would work and like do window cleaning. Like I would do all different odd jobs and try to make money. But once we get into my whole, I'll tell you the story of when I didn't have any money, stuff I used to do. So when I got into, so when I was doing the oxys, after my first, like the mental health, hospitals, mental hospitals, like went to them a few times, had multiple suicide attempts. Some of them came really close, only by God's hand that I didn't succeed on numerous occasions. But when I was doing the oxys, it was getting so bad and getting so expensive and so hard. This one day, I was so sick. I mean, probably one of the worst withdrawals I've ever been. It was like probably a good 36 hours since I've had anything. So I was really going through it. And I remember calling my group of friends, seeing if they had anything to help me out. And like they were out getting stuff and they were just kind of giving me the runaround. And I was like losing my mind. So I had this friend who lived right around the corner from me, older guy. It was him and this little handicapped guy we called Timmy Crutches. And I went around to their house, and as soon as I went to his apartment, he opens the door and he goes, "Oh God, you look horrible." And I'm like, "I feel like death." And so he's like, "Oh, come on in." And I knew like he got high. He did a bunch of stuff. He would have pills now and then. So I was taking a long shot taking a gamble that he would help me out. And he's like, "Oh," he goes, "What's wrong?" I said, "Dude, I'm withdrawing horribly." He's like, "Oh," he goes, "I don't got no oxys, but," because I got heroin. And I'm like, he's like, "It'll definitely help you out." He's like, "It'll definitely get you out of that withdrawal immediately." And I'm like, "I don't care. Give me it." So I wasn't even scared. I'm not even gonna say I was scared. I was so sick, so like broken at that time, where he could probably gave me a bullet and a gun and I would have probably been happy with it. That's how bad it was. And I remember taking it. I didn't shoot it up. And this had to be 2008, because this is when the first round of fentanyl hit Philadelphia, and people were dropping dead left and right. And I know for a fact this had fentanyl in it. So I snorted a little tiny bit of it and done. Like it was like the first time I did oxys, like that feeling. And I'm like, "Oh man, this is bad." Like it felt so good, but I knew it was bad because I liked it too much. And growing up, I liked needles. I always liked needles for some reason. I was a nut. Like when we go to doctors, like when I would always ask, "Oh, do I have to get any needles? Come on, let's go." Or getting blood taken. "Come on, my brother would be freaking out. They would have to get nurses to hold him down. And I'll be like, come on, I'll take him. So like in that moment, I was like, oh, this is bad. So for a while, I was just snorting it. And we would go down to North Philadelphia, and that is like a zoo down there. Like, we're going down to North Philadelphia. Every single corner, there's drug dealers. Every corner has their own brand. They're running you down, banging on your windows, trying to sell it. Like, but not every corner is the same. So there was this one corner that you would go to that like most of the people would go to. And that was the stuff that had the fentanyl. And there would be 20 or 30 people, all drunkies, just walking around in circles like the Walking Dead, waiting for the dealers to come out because the block was so hot with cops and like all the people dying off the block, like from their stuff. But when you, in that sick mind, when you, in that active addiction, when you hear, hey, all these people are overdosing off this one particular stuff, be careful. That's what everyone wants. Everyone's rushing to get that stuff because that's really good. Oh, it's killing people. Oh, that's the good stuff. So this one block, it was known their stuff was people were overdosing and it had fentanyl in it. So I would go there. There would be 20, 30 people just moseying around. 2, 3 dealers would run out and everyone would, whoo,
oh my God.
And there's just people throwing money. Oh, give me 5, give me this, give me a bundle. I need 2 bundles. And like in a matter of 30 seconds, they're gone. Like everything's sold, they're gone. It was insane. So when I would go to this one block, if I got their stuff, great, I was just snorting it. You know, I felt a little bit safer. Well, my sick mind, if I was out there and the block was closed, they didn't have it, I couldn't get nothing, I would have to go to a different block. This stuff's not good. I'm going to shoot it. So that was my mindset when that kind of leap happened. And I knew it was going to happen just because I liked needles too much when I was a kid. So it never, it didn't bother me. It was just, that was my sick, twisted justification for it. That really wasn't a big justification at all. You know, so basically when I couldn't get this one particular stamp of, heroin, and I would have to go to some random block, I would, all right, I guess I have to shoot this because this doesn't have the fentanyl in it. And which realistically probably was worse because I had no idea what the hell was in their stuff either. You know what I mean? Like, so.
When you're desperate though.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I get it.
And when the one day I said to myself, I wonder what it's like to shoot the good stuff now. And that first time I ever shot that stuff with the fentanyl, out. I was out. Thank God I was with someone. And I got brought back fairly quick, but it was like that first time all over again. And I loved it too much. Loved it way too much. And that's what, it got really bad really quick, and it got to the point where like I could make, I got a point where I was, doing 1, 2 bags could last me a couple of days. And then it went to a bundle or 2 a day. And not always I could get the money. I didn't have the money or I'd be really sick. So what I would do if I didn't have any money, then I couldn't get anything, and I was really sick, I always would save my bags, the empty bags. I never got rid of them. And I was very careful about opening them. So this is how sick and like not giving a crap when you're sick gets. So what I would do is I would take those empty bags, refill them with like B12 or some baby powder, or some bullshit that made look like drugs in there. I would refold them, reseal them like almost perfectly. I would go down to the same block that had that stamp, and I wear these special pants that had like 2 sets of like back pockets, basically. And I would be like, oh, go up to the block. Hey, give me 5. He would stick 5 in my hand. I would go put them in my one back pocket, switch them out with the other ones, come bring them back out, still holding them in my hand, and then start acting like I can't find my money. Like, oh, I can't find my money. And then go hand him back the dummy bags. And be like, oh, let me run to my car. I think I left my money in my car, and be gone. So that was like my little trick. And like most of the time they would have no idea because they would get passed out to someone else. And they would get lost. So I would do that a lot. And I was sick. I would go back to the same block. Like I would do it to the same block I would go to every single day.
You get shot that way.
So one time I went down to do it. I went down the night before and did it. And it was like, I think 3 or 4 bags. And when the guy went to go put them back up, he didn't put them back with everything else. He just put them off on the side for like the next customer. While the caseworker, like the block like owner or the boss, was like, hey, give me a couple bags for himself. He gave him those bags, the dummy bags that I gave him back. And then was like, oh, what the hell is this? These are fake. And then the dealer was like, wait, some young dude just gave them back to me. He must have switched them. So when I went back the next night to do it again, they grabbed me up. So as soon as I stepped foot on that block, I had 6 of them grip me up, and they were pulling me into this abandoned house. So I'm trying to fight with everything I got. There's 6 of them. And I ain't a very big dude, especially back then. I was skin and bones. I was a little junky. So I'm trying to fight with everything I got. And I got 6 big Puerto Ricans dragging me into an abandoned house. My life is flashing between my eyes. So I'm going, I look and I see a tinted out like Ford, like a Taurus pull up, all tinted out. And I'm like, yo, here comes the cops. Here comes the cops. So we called out the jump out boys. They're undercover narcs. Well, one thing about that, my cousin was an undercover narcotics cop in Philadelphia. And he was on the jump out boys. So when they were pulling me in the house and these cops pulled up, they let me go. And I started quick taking off because my cousin was there. He didn't see me right away. He didn't know what was going on. He didn't see me. So like I quick peeled off because I knew he was there. I quick peeled off and started walking off. Well, one of his other cops grabbed me. And like he was searching me. I didn't have anything on me. And because
they just ran your pockets.
They just ran my pockets. I didn't have shit.
The other dudes.
Yep. So I didn't have a thing on me. So I'm like, hey, can I get out of here? He's like, why? I'm like, oh, I'm just not trying. And like my dumbass said something like, oh, I don't want to see him. He's like, why? I'm like, because I know him. So he calls him right on over. And my cousin loses his freaking mind, like loses his shit and tells me to go home. So now like I didn't have a car at the time. Like I was taken to the L. So now I have to walk a couple blocks down to the L. So they're dealing with them. I start walking to the L. Well, as soon as my cousin and the other cops take off, here comes all those Puerto Ricans again. And I'm like in the street fighting them, and they get me, start dragging me back into the house. And I'm like, oh God. Like I'm like at this point, I'm just like, do what you're gonna do. Like I don't got nothing left. I've been fighting this for quite a while now. So next thing I know, I hear the car screeching up and all the doors and just feet running. My cousin and all the cops just went around the corner and seen them drag me back in the house and came back, ran up and just demolished them, completely demolished them. And like screaming the entire time, you're going to F with my family. You got, and like, I'm just sitting there like praising God that he just saved me. Like, and I never did it after that. Like, and then there was times where like people found out and I got punched in the face and stuff, but that was the closest I have ever came in that sense of getting killed down there.
Dude, they would have killed you.
They would have absolutely killed me.
Or brought you to the brink of death.
Yes, 100%. Absolutely would have killed me.
You are so lucky.
Yes.
That's a crazy story.
When I tell you I'm a walking miracle, I'm a walking, like between that, numerous suicide attempts, like
track marks.
I tried right, both wrists. I've dropped toasters in the bathtub with me back like early 2000s, before GFIs were a thing. And the power, like my mom has found like so many times I've should have died and tried to, and God had other plans for me. And, going from getting almost killed down in North Philadelphia, overdosing in my car numerous times. My dad finding me up in my room, basically overdosed, like completely unconscious, just completely gone, and finding me and getting me back. Like I should be dead, and going, so I've been to rehab 26 times.
26 times?
26 times. I've been
all inpatient.
All inpatient. All inpatient. And I've done methadone. That's not including methadone, a methadone clinic and all that.
Like MAT programs and stuff like that?
Yeah. So like it wasn't a lack of trying. So, going, when it got bad, it was bad. So when my first time ever in rehab was actually in West Palm Beach, B-Hop.
No way.
Yeah. And I ended up in the hospital in a coma for a little bit in ICU. But that didn't scare me off, and when I was going to rehabs and going to rehab for all those times, I always said, I felt like I was putting stuff on pause. I was playing a video game and I'm putting it on pause. I'm just hitting pause. I'm going back to it. I'm too young. I still want to party. And so I never took it serious. Like I would go in, I would sneak shit in. I'll be trying to have sex with all the chicks, sneaking phones in.
Yeah.
Like I just did not care. And at a certain point when, the true issues came up and I had to really start dealing with the traumas and stuff. And it shifted where I was trying to get clean, like really trying to get clean. But then I was setting up for failure where I would go in, I would get myself clean, and then I would have to go deal with court or dealing with the trauma, all that type of stuff. And it would just rip open those wounds from when I was a kid. And I had no coping skills to deal with it. And it was the only thing I knew was to numb it. And so I would go and relapse and get high. And, so many times, like I would go in to a gorgeous place, like top of the line facilities, and I would try to get kicked out. They would have like notes in my file, like for the weekends, do not kick him out for any reason, because I would do stuff just so they would kick me out. And I just turned it into a game. And then when I got, once I got out, like it just went back. It always got worse. I always picked up right where it left off, and it got 10 times worse. And then, we tried the institution route, not by choice, But, I ended up, I got arrested in New Jersey. I was 18, had a bunch of drugs on me. I mean, a lot of drugs. But it was where I was leaving my girlfriend's house at the time, trying to go to the bus stop, and I had a cop pull up on me. And I had basically a backpack with a lockbox in it full of drugs. And they pulled me over, searched me, broke open the box. Found all, a whole smorgasbord full of drugs. So ended up kind of went to court. And when I got arrested for it, they found out, I told them my dad was a cop. So they kind of just took my information, and I never made it to the jail. I got released on basically ROR, kind of right there.
Mm-hmm.
So months go by, and I go to court for it or whatever, and I get 2 years probation. I get most of the stuff dropped, and the only thing I get convicted of was possession of marijuana. I take 2 years probation. Well, my dumbass decides, I'm going to get this moved to Philadelphia because that's where I live. So I had probation in Jersey that got moved to Philadelphia. Well, now it becomes state supervised. Well, I don't know what that really means. Well, then I find out. So a couple months after I get put on probation, I'm still using. I'm still inactive, heroin, ripping and running hard. And I catch a retail theft. So I used to go steal from Rite Aid and a CVS. I would take Tylenol, Advils, Motrins, and take them down to the little bodegas and sell them to the bodegas. And I would get $5-10 a bottle. Mm-hmm. So I got caught doing it at a Rite Aid and got arrested. Well, it's a retail theft. So they give me ROR bail. And I'm like, oh, sweet. I'm on my way out, get all my stuff. And as I'm walking out the door, they yell my name, and I turn around, like a dumbass. Yeah? Oh, you got a state detainer. And I'm like, what the hell's that? I've never been really incarcerated before. And they're like, what do you mean you don't know? I'm like, you don't know what that is? I'm like, no. And they just start laughing. And they're like, oh, you're going to find out. Now, I'm withdrawing horribly. I'm so sick. Now I'm scared. So they put me back in the holding cell. A couple hours goes by, 4 a.m, a prison van comes and put me on this van. And I'm like, where are we going? They're like, you're going to Gradeford. And I'm like, what? What's that? And they just all start laughing. Like, who's this dumbass?
State prison.
Yeah. So we're on this van for 3 hours, drive up I somehow fall asleep. And I wake up outside the prison to this huge, 20-foot wall, all barbed wire, concrete. And I'm like, oh God, I just want to cry. So we go in, and lo and behold, I'm being held on a state detainer for the Interstate Compact Agreement. And I just have to sit. I can't go into general population. I sit on a probation and parole violators block. And I have no privileges. I can't order commissary. I can't do anything because it's meant as a transition. If you violate your probation, your parole, you go back to Gradeford, and then you go back to your jail, wherever your home jail is. So I just got stuck there for months. And, everyone was telling me, you're not supposed to be here. This is wrong. I'm like, dude, I've never been incarcerated before in my life. I never been to a county. I never been to a prison. I never did none of that. I said, so I had no idea originally how I ended up there. And it took some other guy who was the same age as me being held for the same exact thing. And he was there for 18 months. He was been sitting there. And you just got to sit waiting for the outcome of your case. And it was horrible. but not too bad. It wasn't too horrible because I got out and went back about a month later. Same retail theft. And, luckily the charges got dropped fairly quick, so I didn't have to sit that long. But what was crazy of that was, so when I got out of state prison the second time, I was in there, came out clean, I had some weight on me, and I was starting to deal with a bunch of court stuff. So in my mind, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back to rehab. Now, this is probably the 15th time. I'm going to go back to rehab. And while I'm clean, to get myself a good foundation and get on the right path. So that's what I did. So, but I had to go by my CO, and it was like a whole big process. So I talked to my CO, tell him my PO, tell him what I was doing. And he was like, all right, well, just let me know before you go in, before you get to bed and all that. So late on that night, they call me, say, hey, we have a bed, come on in. So I call my PO, he went home. So I talked to his supervisor, because it ain't like I can say, oh, I'll come tomorrow. When they come and say, we got a bed, you gotta go. So the supervisor says, go ahead, I'll let him know, I'll sign off on it. Okay. So I go to this really nice rehab and, get all settled in. Well, the next morning, they come to me and said, hey, you got to pack your stuff. I'm like, why, what's up? They're like, your dad is on his way. He has to come get you. There's something going on with your PO. Now, this place is like 2.5 hours away from our house. So my dad picks me up from the rehab and tells me, hey, we got to go down to your PO. And they told my dad, if I wasn't there by the end of the day, there would be a warrant for my arrest. Okay. So that's what they told my dad. So when he tells me that, I'm already like, well, I'm getting locked up today. And I have like no really reason why I should be getting locked up. So we go drive all the way down. It's a couple hours, and we get there, and I tell my dad, I said, I'm not coming out. And he goes, oh yeah, you are. I'm like, they told you I would have a warrant for my arrest if I wasn't here today. I am not coming out. So we ended up, I go in, and I sit there for a few minutes. My dad's waiting outside, and I tell him, who I was, and they're like, oh, just have a seat. So 5 minutes later, there's like 5 POs that come out and like have me stand up, put me in cuffs. I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like, what did I do? They're like, well, you went to that rehab without authorization. And I'm like, I had authorization. I talked to your supervisor last night. Well, that was the problem. He was mad that I went to his supervisor and went over his head to get approval. And then he said, oh, well, we can't supervise you in there. And I'm like, why can't you? I said, so they're like, well, if you're getting high, you should be back in jail, back into prison. I'm like, I am not getting high. I said, I just got out. I said, I'm trying to prevent myself from going down that road again. I said, I'm clean. I want to make sure I have a good foundation to continue to stay clean. Like I said, I went to a very nice facility. Like, what is the issue? So they ended up drug testing me, and they swore, like, they kept on saying, oh, you're going back to jail as soon as this comes up hot. And I'm like, it's not coming up hot. I didn't do anything. Sure as shit, it was negative. And they're like, well, if you want to be in somewhere so bad, we'll put you in the halfway back program. It essentially means you're halfway back to prison. So I get sent to a state-run facility, which is a state-run rehab on one floor, a work release from prison on another floor, and then like a halfway house on another floor. So, and we're all like kind of interacting. So you have like the work release guys coming, bringing shit back. And I mean, it was horrible compared to the place I just came from. Like, it was a shithole. And, very, very strict. But it was like, you're still under the DOC, basically, Department of Corrections there. So there was these couple guys that would go out for work release that would bring him back weed and heroin. So while I was in here, this is when a lot of my legal stuff was going on, and I would have to leave a lot, and I would have special passes, but they wouldn't really know why I was leaving. It was a very hush hush kind of thing. So, now when this guy, I think his name was Angel or something, but he was bringing back heroin. So during all this time, I was dealing with all that legal stuff, bringing up those old wounds, and I was starting to spiral. So I ended up getting high again. So I was copping stuff off this guy who would go out for work release, come back every day with some dope. Well, the one day I got word my PO was coming for a drug test, because I guess I was kind of being drawn. I was being like Picasso and just drawing. And I was getting some attention. So my PO was coming up one day to give me a drug test. And I was pretty cool with one of the workers. And like, they weren't letting me go anywhere, really. Like, I had to kind of stay on the unit. And I was like, what's going on? Why can't I leave? And he was like, your PO is coming for a drug test. So like, I look and like, I'm like, oh shit. So I go to my bunkie and I said, hey, I need you to pee for me. So we basically get a rubber glove, and I had him pee for me. And like, I taped it to this, like, what did I do? I took a rubber band and basically tied it to my nuts. And oh yeah. And like had it to my leg, so like to keep it warm. And I poked a little hole in it in the top and stuck a little tiny rubber band around it to keep it from like leaking. So I could just kick off that rubber band and squeeze it and it would pee. So we go to my sure shit. Here comes my PO. We go into downstairs and pulls out a cup and asks me to pee. And now he comes in with me to the bathroom. Now I'm like shitting bricks because I got to get this done without him noticing, right, staring at me. So I'm sitting there trying to get the thing off, the rubber band tip, and it ain't coming off. So I'm sitting there like trying to fumble with it, and then I just kind of give up. And I can't pee right now. So a couple minutes goes by, he gives me water, and I'm like in my mind trying to like going through the process of getting that rubber band off, like in a way where he won't see it. So I'm just going through my mind how I'm going to do it so he does not see, how I'm going to have my hand, everything. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to try pee again. Well, at this point, that glove finger thing has came like off my leg. It's not being warmed anymore, really. So I go in the bathroom with him, kick it. This time I'm able to kick it off, but it wasn't really fully off. So now I'm peeing and squirting over here, squirting over there. And I'm like, oh my God. And I'm just like trying to get it in. And like, I think he can definitely tell something's up. So I finally get it in, get it back in my pants. And I'm astonished that he hasn't seen it. And I know if he sees it, I'm getting locked up. Like, it's automatically getting arrested, technical violation, like I'm screwed. So I get it in there. Well, the temperature isn't right.
And it detects temperature.
It detects temperature. So he's like, oh, why? What's up with the temperature? I don't know. I might have a cold or something. Like just being an asshole. And I'm like, I might be dying. Who knows? I don't know. So he's like, strip. And I'm like, what? He's like, empty everything. He goes, I'm searching. I think you got something on you. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking? So he made me strip down to my underwear. All the way down to my underwear. And he had to get permission, authorization for me to take my underwear off. And he couldn't get it. So, and he kept on saying, he goes, if you got something to tie it off down there, you better give it to me now. Because if I get this authorization and find it, He goes, you're getting more charges. And I'm like, I don't know and I just kept on dying. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't got nothing. And like what I would do, I would grab my junk and then be like, so like you could see all the outlines of it. And I'm like, look, there's nothing here. Like, because all was left was a little tiny piece of glove. And I was like, there's nothing down here. I'm hitting it, and he never could get the authorization. And I'm sitting there like freaking out so much. And it came back negative, but I knew he didn't buy it. I knew he didn't buy it. So now maybe a week later, I'm supposed to be leaving, like not like gone for good. I'm supposed to be going out. I had a couple appointments that day that I had to go do. They wouldn't let me leave. And I'm like, I have to go to this appointment. Like, why can't I leave? And like, there was people calling, like, where's he at? And they're like, he's not leaving. And I'm like, so I go to the chick that was working there. I'm like, what's going on? They're like, they're coming to get you today. He's like, your PO's coming. So I'm like, really? He goes, yeah. I'm like, when? He's like, I don't know, but they're coming for you. So right then and there, I go, I pack up my bag. I give so much shit away, like good stuff, like clothes, just stuff I knew. I'm like, I can't carry this. I can't take this with me. Gone. And as I'm leaving, I see my PO walking in the door. And like, I ended up like, so there was all these windows up front. Like, so when I'm going out, I'm going down to take the back steps, and I walk up by the windows up front, and I look out and you can see the parking lot, and I see my PO walking through the parking lot. And I'm like, shit, now I got to go. And I go out that back door and hauled ass. So now technically I'm on the run because I was in a state-run facility in a halfway back program on probation. So now I'm on the run. I can't go home. My dad's a cop. I would put him in a horrible position. He would have to report it in. He could get in trouble if he didn't. So I'm now out on the streets. And I'm literally bouncing around from drug houses. So at this point, like, I'm just staying in North Philadelphia, working. Like, at this point, like, I know a lot of the different dealers on the corners. I know who runs the block. Like, I was down there all the time. Like, you get to know. And I wasn't the normal druggie, like, I came looking different. Like, wasn't all scruffy, and I came looking like somewhat proper. You know what I mean? So I was able to work on some of the blocks, and like they would give me a play. Like the one dude, he would let me stay at his house. And like, granted, there was a bunch of random dudes staying at the house, but it was a bed. So I'm out on the run, working on blocks, selling, just doing whatever I can. And this whole time I'm like, all I want to do is go to hell home. Like, this shit sucks. So after about 2 or 3 months of being on the run, and like, I'm still talking to my mom and dad, like just letting them know I'm okay, that I'm like, after about 3 months, I'm like, all right, I'm done with this. So I call my PO to go turn myself in. And he's like, listen, man, he goes, I'm done with you. He goes, I sent your file back to Jersey. He goes, you got to go deal with Jersey. And that's not what I did not want to do that, because I don't really know anyone in Jersey. I don't know anything. So I ended up going, calling my PO, and he's like, listen, from everything I'm seeing, he's like, well, where you been at? I'm like, just out ripping and running, dude. And he's like, well, everything I'm seeing is that when you got out, you tried to go into a like good rehab, and they pulled you out and put you in a state-run facility. And I'm assuming that wasn't as good as the one you were at. I'm like, nope. I said, it's exactly what happened. I said, I got out. I was clean. I said, I try to better myself and go into a nice rehab to make sure I would have a good foundation, I said, they've ripped me out and put me in a shit facility. I ended up relapsing because it was a shit facility. And that's where I'm at now. He's like, okay. He goes, well, the thing is, we never authorized them to do that. And he goes, they kind of screwed with you on that. He goes, so I'm not going to violate you for any of that. He goes, but you will have to report here. And it was like in Camden County. He goes, but you also have to live over in Jersey. You have to live here in Camden, which I didn't freaking want to do. So I'm like, all right. I said, well, that works. So like, he was like, well, just come in tomorrow and come see me. Like, so we can actually talk. So I go in the next day. Dude was cool as hell. Didn't violate me, nothing. So we had a shore house in like right by Atlantic City. So I asked him, I said, you know, we have a house down basically in Atlantic City. I said, can I get this transferred to Atlantic County so I don't have to spend money and get a whole nother house when I have a house? We have a house in Jersey. So they let me do that. And like, I just used my Jersey address and like would travel back and forth. And during that, like I was still getting high, you know, like I was relapsed. I was going through all the like different legal stuff but just in and out of rehab constantly. And they knew like when I would go into rehab and stuff, but I don't know how I made it through that probation without any more violations or like getting new charges. But when I was done that was such a big relief, because looking back now, I would never take probation again. Like, it's such a trap. But
were you sent back because you were still getting high? Did you finish probation?
Mm-hmm.
And you were able to pass drug? Or they just never drug tested?
They just never drug tested me.
Wow.
They never drug tested me.
Okay, so what year are we in now?
Probably 2008, 2009.
Okay.
About 2009.
Okay.
Yeah, because this was a little before I moved down here. Because when I finished probation, that was like right after I finished probation, I moved down here.
Okay, so walk us through like the last year before you actually find sobriety.
All right, so that year, all right, where to begin this? So that final year was bad. It was really bad. Multiple overdoses. Ended up dealing with a lot of still legal stuff. Like that was really kind of traumatic in itself. Like I would go to a rehab, and I used to always say, I would always set myself up for failure. Now, it wasn't like intentional, but I would go to a rehab and I would get myself clean, come out, have to deal with legal stuff, open up wounds, and spiral relapse.
This is the childhood trauma courtroom stuff that you were dealing with.
Yes.
Can I ask, how did that eventually come to light, to public, to where the courts got involved?
So it came out when I was in like a meeting, like in therapy.
Yep.
And the person was a mandatory reporter and reported it. And then I ended up kind of leaving, like they were trying to get me to move forward with it. And I was ripping and running. I want no parts of it. Years later, when I was incarcerated, it came back up to the surface, not like by me, by like powers that be. And they like came and got me, and then it just kind of took on a life of its own. And it was not fun.
Okay. So you're in and out of facilities. When you get out, you have to now go to court for this childhood trauma case that you're dealing with, and it's opening old wounds, assuming you're going back to drugs to numb. And then what happens from there?
So the court process was years. So I'm still going in and out of rehab. And one of the last things, like the last rehab. So like I said, I've been in rehab 26 times. Now, some of those was multiple, going back and forth multiple times. So I've been to some rehabs 3 or 4 times. And I was like a frequent flyer. So, but a lot of them towards the end, I was getting kicked out of. So I couldn't go back. So, Thanksgiving, 2009, 2010, right before I came down here, I couldn't go home. My parents thought I was in a rehab. I got kicked out, and I was staying with a friend that I was locked up with. Dude I met in jail. Now, obviously a real winner. And, I'm at his house, and it's Thanksgiving, and he basically kicks me out during his Thanksgiving dinner. He has family coming. He's like, dude, I'm sorry. He goes, I feel bad, but I can't really have you here. I'm like, I got you. No, I understand, So I spent that Thanksgiving walking the streets and like just self-loathing, depressed, just broken, like knowing that I could call my parents and I can go home and have Thanksgiving. Like I know I could do that, but I'm so ashamed and just down. And it was just like, I really was ready just to walk in front of a bus. Like I was at my wit's end. So later on that night, my friend called me, he's like, hey, you're good. You can come on back. He had like a platter for me and stuff. It wasn't like, he just kicked me to the wolves, but he's like, listen, man, he goes, you need some help, dude. You can't be doing this. You need to go back to rehab. Cause like, he's the one who came pick me up from rehab when I got kicked out. So we're looking at rehabs, and like, I'm like, I've been kicked out of all of them. Like, I can't go back to them. So we find this one called Stepping Stones, and, he shows me, and I'm like, dude, it's in Florida. Like, what the hell? He goes, so what? Get the hell out of here. Maybe that's what you need. Get out of here and go down there. And I'm like, well, I went there before. I went to Florida before, and I ended up in the ICU. I don't know. I don't think I like Florida too much. And he's like, dude, who gives a shit? Go down and get your shit together. So I'm like, okay. So we called, and, like, I'm talking to them, and, I'm like, they're asking me if I have a way down here, if someone can help me get me a ticket. And I'm like, I don't know. I said, I can ask my parents or something. And they're like, let us talk to your parents. So I give them my mom's number. They call my mom, and my mom calls me, I'll say 10 minutes later, saying, where are you at? I'm coming to pick you up and taking you to the airport. She already bought me a ticket. Like, she bought a ticket on the phone with them. And, so my mom came up and got me, and we went and got a bag, got my stuff together, and drove me to the airport. And I jumped, and they told my mom, make sure he's not sick on that flight, because they will probably kick him off, and then you're in a whole new realm of bullshit that you got to deal with. So I get on the flight, and surprisingly, it was like 5 of us all going to a friggin' rehab, which was kind of ironic, but we're all going to like the same rehab. And so we get down there, and I spend 3 months there. And I really was taking it serious, like getting out of my environment, getting out of my comfort zone was such a big deal, because I knew I couldn't just leave and go down to North Philly, or leave and call one of my friends to come pick me up. Couldn't do it. So I was stuck. And I did a lot of like soul searching, and like I had a lot of growth in there. But there was still something missing. Like I still wasn't fully satisfied, I guess. And part of this, which I didn't know about until it almost happened. So while I was in there, my mom found her dad after 50 years. Growing up, she never knew her dad. Her stepdad was killed when she was 2, and she never knew her father. And when she was 50, she ended up searching and found him. And turned out he lived down here in Florida, about an hour south of Jacksonville. And, she told him, about me and what I was going through. And while I was in the rehab in Jacksonville, she told him where I was at. And, it was during the holidays. And on Christmas Eve, lo and behold, my grandfather shows up at the rehab that I'm in. And I never met this man, didn't know him from Adam. And he came into the rehab, and it was very emotional. It was the hand of God that really did that. And meeting this man for the first time and seeing how much we have in common, how much we look alike, and it was breathtaking. I mean, it really was mind-boggling. And he understood me completely. He's been where I've been. He understood. And, after he left, there was a lot of question what was going to happen from it. So he came back a week later on New Year's Day. And he told me he wanted me to come live with him. And the facility wanted me to go to some halfway house in Daytona, which I wasn't going to do. And my plan really was to go back to Philly, which, let's be honest, I would have died up there. But he came back and he said, you know what? I just started a nursery a couple months ago. He goes, I understand you. I know where you're at. He goes, the Lord's telling me I need to help you and that I can help you. He said, why don't you come live with me and I'll get you started in a nursery and teach you the business and we'll see where this goes. And at that point, I didn't have shit to lose. So I said, yeah, let's do it. So I got out, a couple days later, and the facility itself, they were like very negative towards that whole thing. Like they were very supportive and, positive about me meeting him, that whole situation. But the fact that I was going to live with him and all that, like in fresh recovery, they weren't really with it. And
because they don't get a kickback.
Exactly,
that's why.
Exactly. I was just going to say that because they really were pushing that halfway house. And it's because they were getting the kickbacks. I mean, I'm not dumb with it. So I ended up, he came up to get me, it was January 7th. And
2011.
He came up to get me. And I remember driving down 95, looking at all the trees, looking at what, all the stuff that we're passing. And I remember getting off the highway and looking, like seeing the hospital and this is where I would be. Like, I never been to the area, the most Florida I've been to was Disney and the hospital in West Palm. So we go down, he lives in Flagler Beach. So we go over to the beach, and I'm like, all right, I could do this, and we pull up to his house, gorgeous home on the water. I'm like, all right, this is not bad. I could do this, I'm so excited. And I feel great, clean. I'm, looking good, put some weight on. And I start doing, the next day I start work and I friggin' hate it. Absolutely hate it. And I'm from Philadelphia. So I'm used to stuff being open, stuff popping, stuff going on. Everything is closed at 7, 8 o'clock at night. I'm at work and the nursery's dead because it's winter. I'm sitting there twiddling my thumbs. I have no idea about anything. I was an EMT up before, I don't know anything about plants. I knew how to grow pot. little bit. I mean, that's about my plant knowledge. So I absolutely hated it. And I found myself at the bar every night trying to meet people, not even to get drunk. Like I would get it one beer and nurse it for 2-3 hours, just trying to meet people and like make friends and find out what the hell was to do down here, you know?
Do you think the drinking was against your sobriety though? Or like you got clean, but all right, I'm like spoiling it for you because your sobriety date is in May of 2011. So there is usage again. Okay. Sorry. I wanted to just clarify that.
Well, I mean, yes, I do think it will mess with it. But I mean, like drinking was never like, even to this day, like I probably wouldn't, if someone offered me, oh, let's go out drinking, I'm good. Like drinking does nothing for me. So I guess that I never really, cause like when I would drink back then, like I knew it was frowned upon, but back then it was more of like, you know, a half a beer over 2 hours. Cause most of the time I would never even finish it. Like I just didn't like it. Like,
no, for sure, dude. Everyone has their own way. Yeah. Absolutely. I just like to say for the audience, absolutely. Like I was an opiate guy. When I pick up a drink, dude, I drink fucking alcoholically and I hated alcohol. It's like that because I'm just fucking out of my mind. Yeah. So I personally just choose not to do anything, but sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but go ahead.
Yeah. I would find myself at the bar and I'm like, this sucks. Like, and it started really like getting homesick. And so I ended up calling my mom. It's like, listen, I need to go back. I'm coming home. Like this shit sucks. And she's like, listen, you need to wait and do the home show. So like my grandfather was so excited to have me at the home show with him.
Home show is the nursery big presentation or something like that?
Yep. So it would be like this big vendor like show where it has all these different vendors from in the county.
Got it.
And like every business sets up a booth and does a display.
Makes sense. Yep.
And like you get a lot of business from it.
Got it.
So that was like, and we used to do like big displays, huge fountains with palms, like it would be intense. So he wanted me there. So I was like, all right, I'll do the home show and then I'll come home. Now I had like stuff I had to do up there that was supposed to be like technically a 2-week trip, but like I knew I wasn't coming back. Like, you know, we told my grandfather, oh, I'll be back in a couple weeks, but in my mind, I wasn't coming back. Well, that 2 weeks, you know, turned in a couple months and I ended up relapsing.
How did you end up relapsing? Like what happened that day you decided to pick up?
So I was dealing with the court issues, you know, and I basically had 2 homicide detectives that took me down into the basement of their DA's office in a storage room and interrogated and grilled me for 4 or 5 hours, just relentlessly.
About the childhood trauma that had happened to make sure you're not lying.
Yep. And it opened
up wounds.
Oh my God, it was horrible. Absolutely horrible. I mean, they treated me like I was a homicide suspect and just would tear me apart every which way they could, trying to get me to trip up. And like, I would be there in tears. I was there like crying my eyes out, like begging them to stop. Like, and it was just like, some of the stuff you see on like in the TV shows and movies, like how ruthless it gets like that. And I mean, and it was like, I didn't even do anything wrong.
You were the victim.
I was the victim. And like when it was found, like in my mind, like I already relapsed, like it was done, you know? And then I had to go have this guy drive me home. Was even
the detective that just grilled you and just ripped you to shreds saying you're lying when you were a victim, and then he's driving you home.
Yep.
What the fuck?
And then like, you know, my dad was a cop, and then it was just like, so when we get home, when he finally gets, like, I wouldn't talk to this guy at all. He kept on telling me, like, don't talk to me. Like, I just would not give this guy the time of day after that. And we get home, and as soon as I go in, he's walking me trying to talk to my dad. And I'm like, F this guy. they just took me in the basement of the DA's office, grilled me for hours. Like, screw him. And my dad lost it on him. And right after that, I literally walked in my house, went up, got changed, and right back out the house. And that was it. Went right in and relapsed.
Right back to heroin.
Right back. And I was trying to kill myself that day. Like, legit was trying to kill myself. Like, I was fully intending to shoot so much where I was intentionally overdosed.
It kicked up that much shit.
Oh my God, yeah.
The trauma that you were dealing with from when you were younger.
Oh my God, yeah. And so...
You're 23 at this point, right?
Yeah. About 21.
So this is in the winter, beginning of spring, 2011.
Yeah.
You end up getting clean finally in May.
Yeah.
How did you end up getting clean again? Now you're back in Philly. How did you end up? Take us to May. So
right when I when I relapsed that day, and I survived that day. I knew right away. I was like, I had to catch it quick. Because in my mind, I was dying that day. It didn't matter anymore. But when the next day, when I woke up, I said, shit, now I got to deal with it. So I would used a little, for a few days. And then it was just like, all right, I got to nip this in the butt right now because it was getting bad again, real quick. I was getting right back to where I was. So I went to my parents and I said, listen, I relapsed. I need to go back down to Florida. I cannot come back. This is it. I need to go back with a different mindset, but I'm not going to rehab. Not happening. I said, I've been there too much. I'm done. I'm over it. It's not doing shit. So we had a doctor who had an office maybe 5 minutes from our house, who was a world-renowned Suboxone doctor. So we reached out to him and he decided to help me, but he told me, he goes, I don't take no shit. He goes, I'm not an easy doctor. He goes, if you screw up one time, that's it. You're done. He goes, if you lose your script, someone steals your script or something, or you call me for a script early, he goes, I cut you. He goes, there's nothing. Just do it the way you're supposed to do it.
So this guy knew that a lot of people use Suboxone to get high.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of people don't take it serious.
No. So I was on Suboxone years before. When I was on Methadone, I went to a Methadone clinic for a little while. And right when Suboxone came out, they were doing a study. It's called the START study, I think. And they were giving me 4 a day. And I was cheeking them and turning around selling them and buying heroin. And then eventually they realized he has a lot of heroin in his system, but no Suboxone. So they took me off of it and then put me on Methadone. But when I went to this guy, I didn't play around. I was at that point.
You were ready.
I was ready. I was done. I was, and
I love that, man.
All the times that I went before that I thought I was done, I knew I was done. I was it rocked me to my core of that was it.
What was it? 'Cause I know what it is, but for the audience, what was that feeling like when you knew in your head you are done and you make that decision to finally chase getting clean or sober?
You admit that you got defeated. I mean,
humility.
You give up. You give up. And you hand it over to the Lord. You got to know it inside. Because if there's any doubt, if there's any inkling, maybe if this happens, I can have a good time. You ain't done. You got to be at that rock bottom. You got to be raw, beaten up until you know to the deepest cores of your soul, I'm done.
It's a vulnerable state.
Yeah. And you're literally got to admit, I can't take, I'm done. There's nothing left. You've taken everything you've gotten. You've taken everything from me. Nothing more you can get. And then you rebuild. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the Lord. Like, you know, my parents legitimately were planning my funeral because they were just waiting for me to die. There was no way around it. I was dying. And my wife literally came out of nowhere, and my parents went from planning a funeral to planning a wedding. And me and my mom were talking about it this morning, and she goes, even to this day, we have no idea where Becky came from.
Your wife now. So you got married in what, 2013?
2013.
So 2 years clean, essentially. You got married.
Yep.
That's awesome.
And my wife has never seen me in that life. Now, like, and we went to high school together. So like, she's seen me, we used to smoke weed together, but she never seen me like in my true active addiction. My kids, none of my kids know. Yep. I mean, I've been like wrestling it with recently, like talking to my oldest who's 17 and like telling him my story. But, you know, the most I always tell him, I said, there's nothing you will do that will surprise me. I've been there. I've done it. I've gone back for some more, thought it was fun, and went back for some more. Like, you know, it's just, but they've never seen me in that way. They've never seen, like, I have 3 little ones. Like, I mean, they're not going to know until they're way older. But like my 17-year-old, I'm always in a dilemma of, do I tell him or do I, because I don't want him to look at me differently.
Well, you're a success story, dude.
I agree.
You have double-digit years of sobriety. And something I do want to touch on, for the audience, you had mentioned you were on Suboxone, you were going to the doctor. A lot of people are against Suboxone and sobriety.
It saved my life.
And a lot of people are against, any kind of MAT treatment. I want to say you, and I know this because we talked about it before we went live here, you followed that doctor's direction and you got off of it.
Yes.
A lot of people stay on it for 10, 15 years, like for as long as it's been around, and they never get off it. They abuse it. That's why it has such a bad rap. You followed direction.
Yes.
And you transitioned back to life. You then from there built a life where you got married. You have 4 kids now.
4 kids. Yep.
You own a business.
Yep.
You are, your power of example.
Thank you.
And go ahead. Sorry.
So like once I came back down and start doing good, it was, the Lord has blessed me in more ways than you can imagine. I mean, I was living here when I went up to Philly, and I went up, I came back down in May, and the following year I went up that May again. I ran into Becky at the bar. I wasn't even going there to drink. I was going to see if I could meet a couple friends, and I ran into her she was with a boyfriend at the time, and got her number. We exchanged numbers.
She was with her boyfriend?
She was with her boyfriend. Right? So I got her number. And she hasn't seen me in 6 years. She legit thought I was dead.
You were looking good.
I was looking good.
You were a year clean.
I was looking good. So not as much gray hair either. So her and her best friend were there. She was with her boyfriend. And I got her number. I gave her mine. Never called her, never texted her or anything. I live in Florida. She lives up there in Philly, whatever. Months later, I ran into her again. And I ran into her and this is a funny story. So I'm chilling and I have this boxer chick all over me. And another funny part, we just figured out she used to work with my mom. We figured that out today on my way up here. We were talking. I was telling my mom the story and she goes, does she have red brown hair, and was her name this? I'm like, yeah. She goes, I worked with her. She was a little crazy. I'm like, oh yeah, makes sense. So I had this boxer lady all over me.
Wait, boxer? She was a boxer?
She was a boxer.
Oh.
Full on boxer. Kickboxer, MMA.
Got it.
And my mom went to a couple of her fights. And I was not feeling it, but not with it. Like this girl could beat my ass and like I was not feeling it. So I'm sitting here trying to figure out a way how to get out of this situation politely, you know? So I'm sitting here and here comes Becky and her friend. And I'm like, oh, I have her number. She's safe. She's going to get me out of this situation. So I pull out my phone and I start texting Becky. Like, you need to help me. Please come save me. And I don't even hit send on the text message. And she texts me, you look like you need some help. You look scared. And like laughing. And I'm like, oh my God, I was just texting you. Come save me. Please help me. She goes, come outside. Let's go smoke a cigarette. I'm like, all right. So I tell this chick, I said, I'm going to go outside and smoke a cigarette real quick. She goes, ew, you smoke a cigarette? I'm like, yep, 2 packs a day, unfiltered. I'll smoke my sleep. I'll smoke hot. What you got? I'm like, you know, and I just see her face going in disgust. I'm like, yes. So out. Me and Becky, I go out. Me and Becky start smoking a cigarette. We hit it off. Now, like I said, we knew each other in high school. We didn't really date. We messed around a little bit, but nothing serious. And like I said, when I went to school, high school, there was like 1 of 10 white kids. So when this cute little white girl came in, that's mine. Mm-hmm. That's mine right here. And, you know, when I really didn't, when she was like, started messing with some other guys, I got butthurt about it. So like after that, I really didn't like, when we were in high school, after I was done with her. Mm-hmm. So like when we started reconnected, you know, that first night we spent together and I was up there for 2 full weeks and I spent those 2 full weeks with her. And I took, she had a 5-year-old son at the time. I ended up taking him to his first day of kindergarten. And that was in September. We started dating. We did long distance for a couple months. We were engaged in February. We had our wedding venue booked before we were actually engaged. And then we got married in July. And it's been 11 years.
Wow. Yeah. That was July 2013.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. So she had a kid prior and you guys have 3 kids together.
Yep. And then I adopted Jack 7 years ago.
That was the 5-year-old that you took to kindergarten.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Your life is full today.
Yeah, dude. It's insane. So now we have 4 kids. I have 2 boys, 2 girls. My girls are in competitive cheerleading. We like the intense all-star cheer where it's like they are at the gym like 3-4 nights a week for like 3 hours. Yeah, my oldest, I have 4 generations that work at the shop with me right now. So me and my grandfather own it.
This was the grandfather, the nursery grandfather.
Yep. He's 83, still in it, still kicking. Me and him do the same thing every day. We each do 2-3 estimates a day. Any jobs that are going, whoever sold it oversees that job. I mean, he's 83 and still is a bull. I mean, he's insane. I got my dad who works, my mom and dad, they moved down. My dad retired from the police department a couple of years ago. So he works for me at the nursery. He like putzes around, fixes stuff. And him and my mom will go down to South Florida and pick up trees for us. And then my 17-year-old son works for us now too.
Wow.
I'm training him to take over to do estimates. So I'm training him like I was started, weeding, watering, learning the stuff, learning everything from the ground up. And then I'll send you to the design school, horticulture school. And because I want my son to be out there with me doing estimates, just like I was out there with my grandfather. The next line will be my son to do estimates with me. And he loves it. I mean, he absolutely, and he's been working there since he was like 11, but like on and off. And like when he was younger, it was more of annoying. Like it was like we were babysitting him.
Yeah.
And about, I'll say a year ago, he asked to come back and like actually work. And I said, I'm fine with it, but you're going to be an employee.
You're working.
You're going to be working. Like I'm going to give you, I'm not going to hire someone else because I need someone. I will give you that spot. But all my other managers, they can fire you. They can reprimand you. They can, you're not getting that
treatment.
That treatment. Oh, I'm the boss's kid. We ain't doing that, because I was looked at negatively because I was the owner's grandson. And when I came in, people looked at me, oh, the owner's grandson, he thinks he could do. I hated it. I resented that so much. And so I want to make sure my son doesn't get that. And I want him to be humble and learn this stuff. I want to make sure he earns what he's, earns his stuff.
It sounds like the relationship with your parents is amazing now. Can you talk a little bit about where your relationship is with your parents?
So now it's amazing. It's always been good. One thing I gotta say about my parents is they're like angels. My parents are amazing. They never gave up on me. When I was ripping and running and I was stealing from them, giving them heart attacks, giving them a real run for their money, they could have easily just, you got to go, kick me out, do it, and wipe their hands. And everyone was telling them to, because you would have been crazy not to. And they never did. They never turned their back on me. They never gave up on me. And it helped me get to where I'm at today. And we'll sit there and we'll go to my mom and dad's house. Usually Monday or Tuesday nights, we'll go to my mom's house for dinner, because my girls have cheer and they watch my other boys while I'm still at work, and they make us dinner. So every once in a while, I'll get there early enough where I'll see my girls, my wife there, and we'll all kind of have dinner together. And I'll just sit there at the end of the table and I'll look and see my wife, my kids, my mom and dad. And I'll say to my mom, I'll say to my dad, I said, "Did you ever think?" And they're like, then my mom will start crying immediately. She's like, man. She goes, "No, we would have never thought that we would be living in Florida with 4 grandkids from you." Like, you should have been dead, and it's such a blessing. And the fact I got my parents to go back to church, that like me, they swore they would never go. My parents, my parents are back at a church, and we used to ask them all the time, "Oh, you want to come to church with us?" And they would come. And the last few months, for some reason, I stopped asking them going, and we would go and they would be there. And I'm like, I would say to my wife, "Oh, did you call?" She goes, "No." And it's just, now they're back to that routine. And like when I was a kid, we always went to church, and then it stopped. Yeah. But now, like, we don't go to a Catholic church, we go to a Baptist church, but it's absolutely amazing. Like, and the way the Lord works is crazy, because when my grandfather came into my life, he was big about going to church, forced me to go into church. I always said I'd never go back to church. He got me back into church. My wife comes into my life, very Christian. Me being a Christian was a very big part of us getting married. So I strengthened my relationship with the Lord even more. And then just over the years of us trying to have children and having issues, and then bam, 3 kids back to back, and owning the business, and just everything that's been happening. There's no other way that this could be happening. And all these pieces fitting together, and me getting to where I'm sitting down here from one phone call from my mom finding her dad. I mean, it's mind-boggling of all the stuff that can happen. And like, I'm not saying, yes, life's good, but we still struggle. Still, we still get stressed out, and having 20 employees and having my family that I have to worry about, and then 20 employees and their families, that's a lot of stress. And you just got to always find other ways to cope with it, and not drugs. You lean on your family, you lean on, your church and your religion, you lean on God, and find, just work through it, and you find other ways to move on and pursue and keep on trucking, basically.
Well, Dan, you are a miracle.
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you sharing your story and your willingness to help someone else, because there are a lot of people struggling out there without hope. Mm-hmm. And you took that first step. You talked about when you made the decision to put the drugs down and chase sobriety. Mm-hmm. And look where your life is today.
Don't ever give up. And, something I've thought about a lot, I've been thinking about this for the last 2 weeks, and what I was going to say, and certain things I want to say and bring up. And, as men, we don't ask for help. And no matter how bad it gets, most men won't ask for help. And, we have a lot of men's suicide is horrible, horrible numbers. It's on the rise every year. And one thing people don't ever talk about is why people don't ask for help. Everyone, pride or, ego. It's not, so it could be those things, but what I find, what people don't ever really realize, us men, we know it, why. We don't ever tell people why. I'll tell you why. If you're a man and you are a sole provider or the main provider of your family, okay, or you own a business, use myself, not saying that I'm feeling this way, but just use myself as an example. Okay. Most times your problems arise from financial or stress. That's a lot of times that's what causes that suicide. Now, if you're a man or a woman and you own a business, or just let alone a sole provider of your family, and you have your mounting problems, say money, all that stuff coming, and you are feeling suicide, you just want to end it all, right? But you think you're going to need help. Okay. If you ask for help, are those problems that are causing all that stress, is that going to get better if you get institutionalized?
Absolutely not, because you're going to be behind on your bills.
There you go.
You're going to be behind with work, providing, increase of stress, increased debt.
So what I find, no one ever says anything, no matter how bad it gets, because there's no system in place to help the root causes of those issues. If I say, if I'm feeling horrible, that I got all these bills, I got all this stuff mounting, stress mounting, and I just want to end it all. If I say something to try to go get help and I go away, all those problems just got way worse and just made my situation way worse. So people suffer in silence, and just deal with it and try to figure it out. And I think we really need to find a way to alleviate those pressures for people in some way where you can ask for help and not make the root cause issues worse. And, if you're struggling, reach out to someone, please. We're losing too many people. And it is so important to talk to people, find someone you can trust. And, it's sickening how many lives could be saved by just someone reaching out, helping, or someone saying something.
Well, Dan, thank you very much.
No problem.
Appreciate you taking the trip, brother.
No problem. I enjoyed it very much.